Free Palestine protester horse guards quickly shut down by armed MOD police. The morning was unusually bright, the sunlight spilling across the wide streets, reflecting off the glass windows of tall buildings that lined the area. People had begun gathering slowly at first, a few scattered faces here and there, holding small flags and banners. As the hours passed, the crowd grew, their voices blending into a soft murmur of conversation, punctuated occasionally by laughter or the clatter of footsteps. The air was filled with a mix of nervous excitement and determination, a kind of energy that only comes when a group of people is deeply committed to a cause. Among the demonstrators were families, students, and older citizens, all carrying their own signs and messages. Some waved handmade flags, others carried professionally printed banners, and a few simply held small cards with messages written in bold letters. The sunlight made the colors of their signs vivid, each one standing out as if it wanted to speak directly to the sky. At the center of this gathering was a small group of protesters who had brought horses with them. The horses were well-groomed and calm, their coats shining under the sunlight. They were adorned with colorful cloths and simple decorations, a symbolic gesture meant to draw attention, not to intimidate. The protesters treated the animals with care, gently patting their necks and whispering words of comfort to keep them steady amid the growing noise of the crowd. Children watching from the sidelines were fascinated, pointing excitedly and asking questions about the horses, while adults around them smiled, some taking photos to capture the unusual scene. The idea of using horses had been a thoughtful one. The organizers wanted something that would visually stand out, something symbolic that would show the peaceful nature of their protest while also making a statement. They had spent weeks planning, coordinating with volunteers, and making sure everything was safe. Safety was a priority, and the protesters had made arrangements to ensure that the horses could move freely without anyone getting hurt. They had also chosen the location carefully, a wide open space where the crowd could gather without blocking traffic or endangering anyone. As more people arrived, the murmur of voices grew louder, and small groups began forming circles, talking about the cause, sharing stories, and exchanging ideas. There was a sense of unity in the air, a shared understanding that everyone had come together for a purpose greater than themselves. Some carried placards that spoke about human rights, others about freedom and justice, and yet others expressed support for those suffering far away. Each sign, each banner, seemed to carry the hope and determination of the person holding it. Journalists and photographers began to appear, cameras clicking and microphones extended into the crowd. Reporters were eager to capture the unusual sight of horses in a protest, an image that was both striking and unexpected. The protesters welcomed the attention, explaining their message patiently and clearly. They spoke of the importance of peaceful demonstration, of drawing attention to issues that often went unnoticed, and of the power of collective action. Their voices were calm but firm, carrying conviction without aggression. Despite the calm surface, there was an undercurrent of nervous energy. The presence of authorities nearby was noticeable, officers standing at a distance, observing quietly. The protesters were aware of this, but they remained focused on their goal, hoping that their peaceful approach would be respected. The tension was not confrontational. Rather, it was the quiet awareness that any gathering of this size could attract attention and scrutiny. People adjusted their positions, making sure the horses were comfortable, that children were safe, and that the banners were visible. As the day progressed, the crowd grew larger, the energy more palpable. Street musicians began playing in the background, adding an unexpected soundtrack to the demonstration. The sound of drums and soft strings mixed with the voices of the crowd, creating an atmosphere that was almost festive, even as the purpose of the gathering remained serious. Some protesters handed out water and snacks to others, small acts of care that strengthened the sense of community. It was clear that this was more than just a demonstration. It was a gathering of people who shared a belief in expressing their opinions peacefully and respectfully. The horses remained a central focus. People took turns walking beside them, guiding them gently through the crowd. Children were invited to feed the horses small treats, under the careful supervision of adults. There was a quiet joy in these interactions, a reminder that the protest, while serious in message, could also be humane and compassionate. Spectators passing by paused to watch, some taking pictures, some simply observing with curiosity. The presence of animals created a sense of calm, a bridge between the intensity of the protest and the everyday lives of those who happened to be nearby. Conversations spread across the crowd, from serious discussions about global events to personal stories of why individuals felt compelled to join. Many shared why this particular cause mattered to them, connecting it to personal experiences or a desire to support justice and equality. Older protesters recounted past experiences of demonstrations they had attended, giving advice to younger participants about staying safe and respectful. These stories created a tapestry of human experience, woven together by the shared purpose of the protest. Volunteers moved through the crowd, offering guidance and assistance, helping people find their places, answering questions, and making sure that everything was running smoothly. Their calm presence helped maintain order, and their efforts ensured that the gathering stayed peaceful and focused. Even in moments of minor confusion, when people shifted or small groups formed spontaneously, the volunteers guided everyone back to a safe and organized flow. The morning slowly turned into afternoon, and the light shifted across the streets, highlighting different parts of the gathering. The horses were led to stand in a line, creating a symbolic guard that drew attention from all around. The protesters standing with them held signs and banners, forming a visual representation of their message. It was a striking scene, both unusual and beautiful, and it quickly attracted the attention of everyone nearby. Passers-by stopped to watch, some asking questions politely, others taking photographs or recording videos on their phones. Conversations began to form between protesters and onlookers, as people asked about the purpose of the demonstration, the symbolism of the horses, and the broader message behind the gathering. Protesters answered thoughtfully, sharing information and encouraging curiosity and understanding. The engagement created a sense of connection, showing that peaceful demonstration could inspire dialogue rather than division. By late afternoon, the crowd had become a steady presence. Despite the heat of the day, no one seemed eager to leave. People stood together, united by a shared sense of purpose, their voices echoing through the streets. The horses remained calm, almost sensing the energy around them, their presence a gentle reminder of the care and thought put into the protest. The symbolic guard was not intimidating. Rather, it was an invitation to reflect, to consider the message behind the gathering, and to witness a peaceful act of expression. Journalists continued to report. Photographers captured every angle, and social media buzzed with images and videos shared by participants and spectators alike. The unusual sight of horses standing guard at a protest made headlines in local news, sparking conversations online and drawing attention to the broader cause. Protesters were pleased, not with the fame, but with the opportunity to raise awareness in a peaceful and creative way. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets, the protesters remained mindful of their surroundings. They adjusted positions, checked on the horses, and ensured that everyone was safe and comfortable. The sense of camaraderie was strong, a reflection of careful planning, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to peaceful activism. The atmosphere was a mix of celebration, reflection, and quiet anticipation for what might come next. Even as the day approached its end, the gathering maintained its energy. People continued to hold signs, chant in unison, and interact with those around them. The horses, calm and majestic, were a steady presence, drawing attention and admiration alike. The protesters had created something memorable, not through confrontation or conflict, but through careful planning, creativity, and a clear message of peaceful expression. It was a day that would be remembered not just for the protest itself, but for the way it was conducted, with respect, care, and a strong sense of community. The crowd, united in purpose, had created a scene that was visually striking, emotionally engaging, and thought-provoking. People left with new connections, new stories, and a shared sense of having been part of something meaningful. And though the gathering was peaceful, the sense of anticipation lingered, a quiet understanding that their message had reached beyond the streets, touching hearts and minds in ways that only thoughtful activism could achieve. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd of protesters continued to grow, the streets now bustling with people united in a shared purpose. Conversations were lively, full of energy and hope. The protesters had created a space where ideas could flow freely, where questions could be asked and answered, and where everyone felt that their voice mattered. Despite the number of people present, the atmosphere remained calm, filled with laughter, curiosity, and mutual respect. Children moved carefully among the adults, fascinated by the colorful signs and banners, while the horses continued to stand patiently, their calm presence grounding the lively crowd. At first, the presence of law enforcement officers was subtle. A few uniforms could be seen at the edges of the gathering, standing silently and observing. Their presence was noticeable but not intrusive. The protesters were aware of them and remained careful, ensuring that the horses were safe and that no one blocked the streets or caused any disruptions. The leaders of the protest frequently reminded participants to stay calm, to respect the boundaries set for safety, and to continue demonstrating peacefully. Their instructions were clear and steady, giving the crowd a sense of organization and purpose even amidst the growing excitement. Gradually, tension began to build. It was not a tense or hostile tension, but a quiet awareness that authorities were watching closely. People whispered among themselves, speculating about what might happen next. The protesters knew that their gathering, although peaceful, was unusual, and that the presence of horses in a city street could draw concern. Still, they were determined to stay calm and respectful, believing that their message could be delivered without conflict. Some journalists and photographers moved closer, cameras raised, eager to capture every detail. Their presence added another layer of attention, reminding the crowd that their actions were being observed by a wider audience. The protesters responded by making sure that their messages were clear and their actions thoughtful. Signs were adjusted, banners held high, and participants encouraged each other to remain focused on the purpose of the demonstration. The horses, sensing the attention and the energy around them, stayed calm, a gentle reminder of the care and planning that had gone into the protest. Small groups formed within the larger crowd, discussing the cause and sharing stories. People spoke about personal experiences, global events, and the reasons why they felt compelled to be part of this gathering. Conversations were respectful, even when opinions differed. Older participants offered guidance to younger ones, sharing advice on how to remain safe and calm, how to communicate effectively, and how to maintain the peaceful spirit of the protest. These moments of shared learning and reflection created a sense of community, a feeling that everyone present was part of something larger than themselves. As the sun moved higher in the sky, the authorities' attention became more noticeable. Officers in uniform began walking along the edges of the crowd, observing movements and noting the positions of the horses. Their presence, though not aggressive, created a new layer of energy among the protesters. Whispers spread, speculating about what actions the authorities might take, but the leaders continued to emphasize calm and nonviolence. They reminded the crowd that their strength lay in their unity, in their ability to demonstrate peacefully and thoughtfully. Despite the underlying tension, the atmosphere remained lively. Musicians continued to play in the background, drums and soft melodies mixing with the voices of the crowd. Children laughed and clapped along, fascinated by the sounds and the movement. People continued to hand out water and snacks, small gestures of care that strengthened the bonds among participants. Volunteers guided newcomers, explained the purpose of the protest, and ensured that the horses were comfortable. Every action was deliberate, a reflection of the thoughtfulness and planning that had gone into the gathering. The symbolic horse guard remained at the center of attention. The horses were positioned in a line, creating a visual barrier that was both striking and symbolic. The protesters standing alongside them held banners and signs, forming a living tableau that captured the attention of everyone present. Onlookers paused, some asking questions politely, others taking photographs or recording videos on their phones. The presence of the horses made the protest memorable, providing a unique and creative way to draw attention to the cause. As the afternoon progressed, small challenges began to appear. The crowd was large, and it was difficult to ensure that everyone stayed in the designated areas. Volunteers moved quickly, guiding people, answering questions, and helping maintain order. They reminded participants to be mindful of the horses, to watch for children, and to respect the space around them. The effort required careful coordination, But the volunteers worked together seamlessly, ensuring that the protest continued to be safe, organized, and peaceful. At one point, a small misunderstanding occurred when a few participants tried to move closer to the horses for photos. The horses, startled by the sudden movement, reacted by stepping back, and a few people in the crowd gasped in surprise. Quickly, volunteers stepped in to calm both the horses and the participants, explaining how to approach animals safely. The incident was brief and handled smoothly, and it reinforced the importance of care and patience throughout the demonstration. Meanwhile, journalists continued to capture the event from various angles. Reporters interviewed participants, asking about their motivations and the significance of the horses. Their questions were thoughtful, and the protesters responded with calm, clear explanations. They spoke about the importance of peaceful expression, about raising awareness for those who could not speak for themselves, and about the power of creativity in activism. The interaction between journalists and protesters highlighted the thoughtful planning behind the demonstration and the commitment of everyone involved to maintain a peaceful, respectful atmosphere. The presence of authorities continued to influence the crowd subtly. Officers walked along the edges of the gathering, observing quietly but making their presence known. The protesters did not react aggressively. Instead, they adapted, ensuring that their actions remained calm and measured. Leaders of the protest encouraged participants to focus on their message, reminding them that their power came from peaceful unity, not confrontation. The crowd responded with nods and smiles, reassured by the calm guidance of those leading the demonstration. As the day moved into the late afternoon, the shadows of buildings grew long, stretching across the streets. The light softened, casting a warm glow over the gathering. People continued to engage with one another, discussing ideas, sharing stories, and reflecting on the importance of their actions. The horses remained central to the scene, their calm presence a reminder of the thought and care behind the protest. Even passers-by who had not initially intended to stop were drawn in, captivated by the unusual combination of people, horses, and colorful banners. Despite the growing size of the crowd, the atmosphere remained peaceful. People were careful to avoid blocking streets, and volunteers continued to guide the flow of participants. Children were kept safe, and the horses were treated with gentle attention. The protest demonstrated that a gathering could be both large and organized, passionate and calm, energetic and thoughtful. Every element of the event, from the placement of the horses to the distribution of banners and water, contributed to a sense of unity and purpose. The protesters also took time to reflect on their goals. Small groups gathered to discuss the broader message of the demonstration, considering ways to amplify their voices beyond the streets. Ideas flowed freely, from writing letters and organizing educational events to sharing stories online. The discussions were thoughtful and constructive, emphasizing the long-term impact of peaceful activism. It became clear that this gathering was not just about the day itself, but about creating a foundation for continued awareness and engagement. As the late afternoon faded into early evening, the crowd showed no signs of losing energy. People continued to stand together, chant, and hold their banners high. The presence of the horses remained a symbol of their commitment to creativity and peaceful expression. Photographers captured the changing light, the interactions among participants, and the calm dignity of the animals. The images would later circulate online, drawing attention to the protest and its unique approach to activism. The atmosphere, though calm, carried a sense of anticipation. Everyone present knew that large gatherings attracted attention, and the protesters remained aware of the authorities' presence. There was a quiet understanding that their actions were being closely observed, but this awareness did not create fear or aggression. Instead, it reinforced the need to remain composed, respectful, and focused on their message. Leaders of the protest emphasized the importance of patience, reminding everyone that peaceful demonstration was the strongest form of advocacy. Throughout the late afternoon, small gestures of care and community continued. Volunteers offered guidance, handed out water, and ensured that the horses remained calm. Participants checked on one another, ensuring that children and elderly attendees were safe. The symbolic horse guard stood proudly at the center, a visual representation of the thoughtfulness and creativity of the protest. It was a living symbol of how peaceful, well-planned activism could capture attention and inspire dialogue without aggression or conflict. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the streets, the crowd slowly began to take stock of the day. People reflected on what had been accomplished, on the connections they had made, and on the conversations that had been sparked. The horses were led carefully to a resting area, still calm despite the long day. Participants expressed gratitude for the volunteers and organizers, recognizing the effort and care that had gone into making the gathering safe, impactful, and memorable. The late afternoon and early evening marked a turning point. While the protest remained peaceful, there was a sense of readiness among the participants. They understood that their presence had been noticed, and they were prepared to respond calmly and thoughtfully to whatever might come next. The atmosphere was one of quiet confidence, built on careful planning, mutual respect, and the shared understanding that their strength lay in peaceful unity. By the time the sun had fully set, the streets were bathed in soft evening light. The crowd remained, still engaged, still connected, still focused on their message. The horses, calm and patient, had become an enduring symbol of creativity and care within the demonstration. The protesters' voices, their signs, and their actions had combined to create a memorable, peaceful, and thought-provoking gathering. It was a moment that would be remembered not just for its visual impact, but for the unity, thoughtfulness, and care that had defined every action. As the evening drew closer, a quiet shift began to ripple through the crowd. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, and long shadows stretched across the streets. The protesters, still standing with their banners and signs, were aware that the day was reaching its peak in both visibility and significance. The horses, calm and patient all day, seemed to sense the change in energy around them, their ears flicking at sounds and movements, but remaining composed. Volunteers continued their work, guiding the crowd, answering questions, and making sure that everyone, including children and elderly participants, remained safe. At the edges of the gathering, the presence of authorities became more noticeable. Officers in uniform, some standing in small groups, others walking deliberately along the perimeter, were observing the crowd closely. Their movements were careful, measured, and professional. The protesters noticed them but remained calm, understanding that the authorities were there to ensure public safety. There was no visible aggression, only careful observation, and this created a mix of curiosity and quiet tension among the participants. Whispers spread throughout the crowd as people speculated about what might happen next. The leaders of the protest sensed this tension and moved quickly to address it. They reminded the crowd to stay calm, to maintain the peaceful spirit of the demonstration, and to continue engaging respectfully with those around them. They emphasized that the strength of the gathering was in its unity and discipline. Participants listened carefully, nodding, and some even repeated the messages to nearby friends or newcomers. The sense of organization, even amid the growing anticipation, helped keep the atmosphere positive and controlled. Meanwhile, photographers and journalists continued their work, capturing images and recording videos. They circled the symbolic horse guard, documenting every angle, every interaction, and every detail of the peaceful demonstration. Many asked protesters for comments, and the participants responded thoughtfully, explaining the significance of the horses and the purpose of the gathering. Their voices were calm but strong, carrying the message of unity, peaceful protest, and the importance of raising awareness without confrontation. Despite the calm, small disturbances began to appear. A few curious onlookers tried to approach the horses too closely, eager to take photographs or pet them. The animals, sensitive to sudden movements, reacted by shifting slightly or stepping back. Volunteers and leaders quickly intervened, guiding the visitors and reminding them of safe distances. These small incidents were handled calmly and efficiently, demonstrating the careful planning and preparation that had gone into the protest. Participants learned quickly, and the crowd adjusted smoothly, maintaining order and focus. As the light shifted and evening approached, a sense of anticipation grew. The authorities at the edges of the crowd became more visible. Some officers moved closer, carefully positioning themselves near the symbolic horse guard. Their movements were deliberate but non-threatening, designed to monitor the gathering and ensure that everything remained safe. Protest leaders continued to emphasize calm, advising everyone to stay organized, keep the horses steady, and avoid any sudden movements. The crowd responded positively, their determination to remain peaceful evident in their focused expressions and careful actions. The horses, still calm, remained at the center of attention. They had become more than just animals in a demonstration. They were symbols of creativity, peaceful protest, and careful planning. People continued to approach them respectfully, guided by volunteers, and children marveled at their size and calm demeanor. The presence of the horses provided a steadying influence on the crowd, reminding everyone of the peaceful purpose of the gathering. As time passed, the authorities' attention became more direct. Officers in uniform began to speak quietly into radios, coordinating their positions and movements. The crowd noticed the subtle shift but continued to remain calm. Protest leaders reminded participants to stay focused on the message, to avoid confrontation, and to maintain a respectful demeanor. Their guidance was clear and firm, reinforcing the importance of unity, patience, and composure. A small group of organizers gathered near the horses to discuss the situation. They reviewed the safety of the animals, the placement of participants, and the best ways to communicate with the authorities if necessary. Their planning was precise and thoughtful, reflecting their commitment to maintaining a peaceful demonstration while protecting everyone involved. Volunteers moved through the crowd, reassuring participants, offering guidance, and helping maintain a steady flow of activity. As the evening continued, a subtle tension hung in the air. The crowd remained engaged, holding signs, speaking with one another, and interacting with journalists. However, everyone could sense that the situation had reached a critical point. The authorities, now more actively observing the symbolic horse guard, were preparing to take action if necessary. Protest leaders calmly briefed participants on how to respond. Stay organized, maintain safe distances from the horses, and continue to communicate peacefully. Suddenly, the first steps of action became clear. A group of officers, moving in a coordinated manner, approached the horses. Their movements were precise, deliberate, and professional. They did not shout or use aggressive gestures. Instead, they communicated quietly with each other and with the crowd, signaling that they intended to intervene carefully. The protesters held their ground, keeping the horses calm and maintaining a respectful distance. Volunteers guided participants, ensuring that no one panicked or made sudden movements. The tension in the air was noticeable, but the calmness of the protesters and the organization of the crowd prevented chaos. The authorities, now close to the horses, began gently guiding the animals to a safe position away from the densest parts of the crowd. They used calm tones and careful movements, ensuring that the horses were not startled. Protest leaders coordinated with the officers, providing guidance and communicating about the animals' behavior. The collaboration, though brief and cautious, prevented any harm to the animals and maintained the safety of the participants. Spectators watched quietly, impressed by the professionalism and care of both the protesters and the authorities. During this careful intervention, participants continued to hold their banners high, their voices calm but steady. They chanted softly, a rhythm that encouraged unity rather than conflict. Journalists and photographers captured the scene, documenting the careful handling of both the horses and the crowd. The event, while tense, remained peaceful, demonstrating the effectiveness of preparation, communication, and mutual respect. As the horses were safely guided to a secure position, the crowd began to settle into a new formation. Volunteers and leaders ensured that everyone had space, that children were safe, and that participants continued to demonstrate peacefully. The authorities, now satisfied with the arrangement, continued to monitor the gathering from a respectful distance. The tension, though still present, had eased slightly, replaced by a sense of cautious relief. Participants took a moment to reflect on the events. They recognized the professionalism of the authorities, the care taken to protect the horses, and the effectiveness of their own planning and organization. Conversations began to spread through the crowd, with people discussing how well the situation had been handled, how the peaceful approach had prevented conflict, and how the symbolic horse guard had drawn attention to their cause without aggression. The atmosphere, though still charged with energy, was now marked by a sense of accomplishment and calm. As evening turned to night, the lights of the city began to illuminate the streets. The crowd remained present, holding signs and banners and engaging in quiet conversations. The horses, now resting safely, were still visible to the participants and spectators, a symbol of the creativity and peaceful intent that had defined the protest. People reflected on the lessons of the day, the importance of preparation, the value of communication, and the power of peaceful unity. Leaders continued to guide participants, reminding them that the demonstration was not just about the moment, but about the message it carried. They encouraged everyone to remain organized, to continue engaging respectfully with others, and to think about the broader impact of their actions. The crowd listened attentively, understanding that their strength lay in their ability to demonstrate without aggression, to communicate without conflict, and to maintain a sense of dignity and purpose. Even as the night grew darker, the energy of the crowd remained strong. People continued to hold signs, speak with one another, and engage with journalists. Volunteers moved quietly but efficiently through the gathering, ensuring that everyone remained safe and that the horses were still comfortable. The careful planning and organization of the protest had allowed it to remain peaceful, even in moments of high tension. By the time the night was fully upon the city, the crowd had begun to reflect on the day's events. They recognized the significance of their gathering, the attention it had drawn, and the careful handling of the horses and participants. Conversations turned to future plans, ways to continue advocating for their cause, and lessons learned from the experience. The symbolic horse guard, once the center of tension, now represented the careful balance between creativity, peaceful expression, and respect for public safety. The protesters gradually began to prepare for departure. Volunteers coordinated the safe removal of signs and banners, ensuring that everything was organized and accounted for. Children were guided safely to their guardians, and the horses were prepared for transport back to their resting areas. Leaders thanked participants for their calm and respectful behavior, acknowledging the effort and discipline that had allowed the gathering to remain peaceful and impactful. As people left, many stopped to take one last look at the symbolic horse guard. The animals, calm and majestic, stood quietly, reflecting the care and attention that had defined the day. The protesters departed with a sense of accomplishment and reflection, aware that their actions had been noticed and that their message had reached both local and wider audiences. The day had been marked by careful planning, unity, and peaceful expression, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had been present. Even after the crowd had dispersed, the lessons of the day lingered. Participants continued to share stories online, reflecting on the careful coordination, the interactions with authorities, and the peaceful handling of the horses. The event became a symbol of how thoughtful planning, mutual respect, and calm determination could allow a gathering to be both impactful and safe. The protesters had demonstrated that peaceful activism, creativity, and care for others, both human and animal, could coexist, creating a memorable and meaningful experience. By the end of the night, the streets were quiet once again. The horses had been safely returned, and the crowd had dispersed respectfully. Authorities continued their monitoring quietly, satisfied that the situation had remained under control. The protesters, though tired, felt a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished. They had remained united, creative, and peaceful, conveying their message without conflict. The day had been challenging, full of tension and anticipation, but it had ended with calm, reflection, and a renewed commitment to thoughtful activism. After the sun had fully set and the last traces of daylight disappeared, the city streets were quiet again, though the energy of the day lingered in the minds of those who had participated. The crowd had dispersed peacefully, but the impact of the gathering remained. Participants walked slowly, talking in small groups, reflecting on the events and the attention their peaceful protest had received. The symbolic horse guard, now safely returned to their stables, had left an unforgettable impression. People carried not only the signs and banners they had held, but also the lessons of calm organization, unity, and thoughtful action. As participants returned to their homes, many continued to discuss what had happened. Families walked together, recounting moments of curiosity, excitement, and pride. Children excitedly shared stories about the horses and the unique way the protest had been conducted. Adults reflected on the professionalism of the authorities, the organization of the volunteers, and the respectful cooperation that had made the day successful. Conversations ranged from the significance of the cause to ideas for future peaceful demonstrations, emphasizing learning and improvement for the next gathering. Social media quickly became a platform for sharing experiences. Participants uploaded photos and videos, showing both the peaceful nature of the protest and the symbolic horse guard. Comments poured in from people who had witnessed the event online, expressing admiration for the creativity, care, and discipline of the demonstrators. Discussions expanded beyond the immediate protest, with people reflecting on the power of peaceful activism, the importance of communication with authorities, and the ways in which symbolic actions could capture attention without causing conflict. Some participants chose to write short reflections or blogs, describing their experiences from a personal perspective. They wrote about their excitement at seeing the horses, the sense of community within the crowd, and the moments when they had felt both tension and calm. Their words were thoughtful, highlighting the lessons learned from careful planning, organization, and respectful interaction. Through these reflections, the story of the protest reached an even wider audience, inspiring others to think about how activism could be conducted peacefully and effectively. Local journalists continued to report on the event, highlighting both the peaceful nature of the gathering and the unique creativity of the symbolic horse guard. Photographs of the horses standing calmly among the protesters were featured prominently in newspapers and online news portals. Articles focused on the collaboration between the authorities and the protesters, the careful handling of the animals, and the way participants maintained calm despite moments of tension. The coverage emphasized that activism could be both meaningful and responsible, capturing attention without resorting to aggression. Conversations among participants also turned to the broader implications of the protest. Many discussed how small, thoughtful actions could inspire change and raise awareness, even if the immediate impact seemed limited. The symbolic horse guard had become a metaphor for patience, creativity, and peaceful resistance. People reflected on the importance of maintaining unity, being prepared, and communicating clearly. The day had shown that careful planning and mutual respect could allow a protest to be both impactful and safe, creating a lasting impression on both participants and observers. Volunteers played an important role even after the crowd had dispersed. They coordinated the safe transport of banners, signs, and supplies, ensuring that nothing was left behind and that the symbolic horse guard had been returned without stress. They checked in with participants, offering words of appreciation and encouragement. Their efforts highlighted the importance of teamwork and foresight in peaceful activism. Participants expressed gratitude, recognizing that the success of the event depended not only on individual dedication, but also on collective effort. As the night progressed, small groups of participants continued to gather in quiet corners, discussing the day's events. Some spoke about the careful planning required to maintain safety, including the management of the horses and the coordination with authorities. Others reflected on the emotional impact, noting moments of pride, connection, and calm determination. These discussions reinforced the sense of community among the protesters, reminding them that their strength came not only from their message, but also from the unity and care with which they conducted their demonstration. Meanwhile, authorities quietly concluded their monitoring. Officers who had been present during the protest reported back to their teams, noting that the gathering had been peaceful, well-organized, and safe. The horses had been handled carefully, and the crowd had remained composed despite moments of tension. Their feedback reinforced the idea that proactive communication and collaboration between organizers and authorities could ensure public safety without conflict. The professional handling of the situation was acknowledged by both sides, highlighting the potential for mutual respect in situations that might otherwise have been tense. As the days passed, the story of the protest continued to spread. Social media platforms buzzed with images and reflections from participants and observers alike. People praised the peaceful approach, the creativity of the horse guard, and the careful organization of the event. Discussions expanded beyond the local context, inspiring other communities to consider how activism could be conducted thoughtfully and responsibly. The protest had become a case study in balancing symbolic expression with public safety, demonstrating that powerful messages could be delivered through careful planning and respectful action. The protesters themselves began to think about the next steps. Many discussed ways to build on the momentum created by the gathering, considering educational campaigns, online initiatives, and community outreach programs. They focused on continuing to raise awareness in ways that were safe, thoughtful, and inclusive. The lessons learned from the careful handling of the horses, the coordination with authorities, and the peaceful management of the crowd became foundational principles for future activism. These discussions emphasized growth, reflection, and a commitment to making a difference in responsible ways. In their personal reflections, participants noted the unexpected impact of small details. The horses, initially a symbolic gesture, had captured the imagination of both the crowd and the media. Their presence reminded everyone that creativity and thoughtfulness could enhance the visibility of a message without creating conflict. The calm and gentle handling of the animals had mirrored the peaceful nature of the protest, creating a powerful visual metaphor for careful activism. Participants realized that such small, symbolic actions could have lasting significance, leaving impressions that went beyond the immediate gathering. The organizers, too, took time to reflect on their success and challenges. They evaluated the logistics of the event, the communication strategies used, and the ways in which safety had been maintained. They recognized that careful planning, teamwork, and clear communication were key to the positive outcome. Lessons learned included the importance of preparing for unexpected situations, maintaining calm under pressure, and ensuring that all participants understood the principles of peaceful demonstration. These reflections would guide future events, making them even more effective and safe. Community members who had observed the protest, whether in person or online, shared their admiration for the respectful and creative approach. Conversations in local forums and community groups highlighted the effectiveness of nonviolent expression, the beauty of the symbolic horse guard, and the ability of thoughtful activism to capture attention. Many noted that the day had set an example for how demonstrations could be conducted responsibly, with respect for animals, participants, and the wider public. The positive response reinforced the idea that peaceful, creative actions could inspire meaningful dialogue and awareness. In the weeks that followed, participants continued to share their experiences. Stories, photographs, and videos circulated widely, keeping the memory of the protest alive. The symbolic horse guard became a recurring theme in discussions about creativity, peace, and effective advocacy. Educational groups used the event as an example of how preparation, communication, and respect could lead to successful activism. Children who had attended spoke enthusiastically about their experiences, recounting moments of curiosity, excitement, and learning. Their reflections emphasized the lasting impact of the event on future generations. The organizers also began to focus on long-term goals. They planned workshops, online discussions, and community meetings to further raise awareness and engage people in peaceful advocacy. They emphasized the principles learned from the protest: careful preparation, collaboration, creativity, and respect. These initiatives aimed to continue the positive momentum, ensuring that the lessons of the day were not forgotten, and that future efforts would be informed by the successful example of the symbolic horse guard demonstration. Participants reflected on the emotional impact of the day as well. They remembered moments of quiet pride, shared joy, and connection. They recalled the calmness of the horses, the professionalism of the authorities, and the respectful cooperation of the crowd. These experiences reinforced the idea that activism could be both meaningful and safe, inspiring confidence in the power of thoughtful, peaceful action. The protest had demonstrated that unity, creativity, and care could create lasting impressions without conflict. Even months later, the event continued to inspire discussions, both online and in communities. Stories about the symbolic horse guard and the peaceful handling of the protest served as reminders that activism could be effective without aggression. Participants shared lessons with friends, family, and new members of activist groups, emphasizing the importance of preparation, communication, and respect. The memory of the gathering remained vivid, a source of pride and motivation for continued advocacy. In their personal lives, participants carried the lessons learned from the protest into everyday actions. They became more mindful of communication, planning, and respect for others. They applied these principles in community projects, volunteer work, and personal interactions, recognizing that the skills demonstrated during the protest could benefit many areas of life. The experience had created not just memories, but also a framework for responsible, thoughtful action in any context. Ultimately, the protest and the symbolic horse guard had achieved more than the organizers could have imagined. They had created a memorable, visually striking, and meaningful demonstration that captured attention, inspired reflection, and encouraged dialogue. The peaceful approach, careful planning, and thoughtful handling of both participants and animals had set an example for responsible activism. The lessons learned would continue to influence future events, shaping a culture of thoughtful, creative, and respectful advocacy. The impact extended beyond the streets where the protest had taken place. Online discussions, community events, and educational initiatives carried the story further, inspiring new participants and encouraging communities to consider how peaceful activism could make a difference. The symbolic horse guard became more than a moment in time. It became a symbol of unity, creativity, and responsible advocacy. As the days turned into weeks and months, the participants looked back on the protest with pride and reflection. They remembered the calm determination of the crowd, the care taken with the horses, and the respectful cooperation with authorities. They recognized the significance of their actions, the inspiration they had provided to others, and the lessons they had learned. The experience had reinforced the idea that activism could be both meaningful and safe, powerful and thoughtful, creative and respectful. The protest, now a story shared widely, served as a lasting example of how unity, preparation, and peaceful expression could create impact. It reminded everyone involved that careful planning, collaboration, and respect were not just tools for the day but guiding principles for any meaningful effort. The lessons learned would continue to resonate, shaping the way people approached advocacy, creativity, and community engagement for years to come. In the end, the symbolic horse guard and the peaceful demonstration had left a mark that could not be erased. It had inspired participants, observers, and communities, proving that activism could be conducted thoughtfully, respectfully, and creatively. The story of the protest, its lessons, and its impact would continue to be shared, remembered, and celebrated, a testament to the power of peaceful action and the importance of unity, care, and creativity in creating meaningful change.